Welcome back to another episode of the Tracy Take. Today we are talking about fantasy sleeper tight ends. But first, if you have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe the video and let us know if we miss any of the tight ends that you think are going to be sleepers in this year's fantasy draft. To kick it off, Tyler, I want to go to you and kind of see who you think is going to be a top fantasy tight end. I know everybody would love to get a Travis Kelce, a Darren Waller, even possibly a Kyle Pitts in this year's draft, but those guys might go early.
Yeah.
And the tight end position is one of the biggest positions that we see a drop off from the top three to the, other starters. And so I just want to go ahead and see kind of who you think is going to be a starting caliber tight end this year in fantasy football.
Yeah, absolutely. It's if we're going based off overall value, a tight end is one of the top ones where you could probably see some of those guys go early that you mentioned, Kelsey, Waller, the Kittle potentially as well. But if you're unable to get one of those guys and you start focusing on the running back, quarterback, and receiver positions, and you get to the 6th, 7th round, so to say, start looking for a guy called Logan Thomas, the tight end from Washington football team. He's one of the main guys for me, is as we've kind of discussed in our other videos. Go check it out, our running back and receiver videos. We discuss them. But the Washington offense is a little underrated. It is marred by just an old quarterback, just kind of what they've had the past 2 seasons. And so people think that as an indication of the team not being good or the offense not being good. But last year, Logan Thomas played in 16 games. And if you're in a PPR league, he had 72 receiving yards, 72 receptions, 670 receiving yards, and 6 receiving touchdowns, which averaged just under 11 points per game. Now, that is half of what Travis Kelce produced over the average game span. However, though, that put him a 7th overall amongst tight ends. So it seems like a pretty consistent option. He's going to get multiple catches per game, probably hopefully shooting for 50 yards and potentially a touchdown as well. And at this position, at that point in the draft, it's really all you're kind of looking for from the tight end. Someone who can just consistently put up the 11 points, just to have a baseline. Every now and then it's going to go off. But having those high reception counts, which also helps having for Logan Thomas, having Terry McLaurin on the other side of the ball, brings a lot of attention to the defense. He's going to be open, which will allow for more catches. So I think Logan Thomas is a great option, and I think in a very solid, underrated offense that people don't talk about as much.
Yeah, no. And also, too, another thing that we kind of talked about with the running backs with Antonio Gibson, Logan Thomas is also one of those guys that they drafted a rookie in John Bates from Boise State. But other than that, there's really no competition at the tight end position. Whereas if you go with a guy like Jonnu Smith or Hunter Henry in New England, there are 2, 3 other tight ends that are going to be worked into the mix and kind of they'll be competing for snaps and everything.
Yep.
So it's something to kind of keep an eye on, especially if you're looking for a consistent starter in the tight end world. So up next, I have a tight end that I think is actually going to be probably one of the top 4 or 5 tight ends in the NFL this year, and that is TJ Hockenson from the Detroit Lions. Mainly in a similar situation to Logan Thomas, they have no other tight ends, but they also have no other wide receivers. They have almost no weapons to throw to. Their quarterback, Jared Goff, was actually, people don't realize, was very tight end heavy in that Rams offense. He loved Gerald Everett and Tyler Higbee kind of over the middle. And TJ Hockenson is a guy that they're going to keep on the field for all 3 downs. He's not going to come off in running situations because he's a good blocker, but he's also a really good route runner and has reliable hands. And his stats in 2020 actually surprised me, and that was with poor quarterback play. So his stats are 67 receptions for 723 yards and 6 total touchdowns. He averaged almost 11 yards a catch. And I think he's only going to build on that because I think the quarterback play is going to be more consistent and there's less people to throw to around him. So I really think this is a guy whose ADP is at the top of the 7th round, is a guy that you can get and probably, rely on him to be a top 5 tight end in the league.
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm. No,
so
I
yeah.
agree. TJ Hockenson is going to be a guy. He's going to be on the rise. He could potentially develop into the top tier of tight ends that we
Mhm.
discussed earlier with the
Yeah.
Kelsey and the Wallers. But yeah, he's going to be one because similar to a running back, and he's a sole running back in the system. He's just going to get a lot of touches, a lot of opportunities,
Mhm.
and the more opportunities you have, the more chances for success and the more receptions he's going to have. So I really like that pick. He's a guy that on the mock drafts I've done, when I see his name and I start thinking about getting a tight end, he's one I feel very confident in and
Mhm.
grabbing him up. And so I will say I'm looking forward to the comments on people who might disagree with you, saying that Jared Goff is going to be more consistent quarterback than Matthew Stafford.
I only say consistency because Stafford was hurt and he was having to play with like second and third string quarterbacks. That's what I meant by
Oh, I see what you're
consistency.
saying now.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, all right, that's
Not
fair.
that Matt Stafford is or Jared Goff is better than Matt Stafford, because that's definitely
Yeah,
not the case. But Matt Stafford was hurt and uh, he was having to play with guys like, I think not Brock Purdy, that's the Iowa State guy. I forget the guy from Purdue that was playing for
David Blau.
yeah, David Blau.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you NFL
was
Network. That's the only reason why I
yeah.
know that name. Watched the game the other night.
But yeah, so it's just something that I think he will benefit from. But then also too, I think Stafford has the ability to go to outside wide receivers more, where Jared Goff is going to like the safer over the middle target, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I agree with that. So now moving on to my final sleeper pick for this series of episodes. And this one is one is stat wise, he ranked fifth amongst tight ends last year, but I feel like he's not really a household name yet, only because in Green Bay there's a clear stud pass catcher that everyone knows is Devontae Adams. But the tight end Robert Tonyan is a guy to really keep your eye on. He didn't have as many catches as Logan Thomas or TJ Hockenson, but what he makes up for in the catches is a nice, big, fat red zone threat, because he
mhm.
had 11 touchdowns last year. He had just under 600 yards with 52 catches. And with Devontae Adams bringing so much attention, now they have Randall Cobb back as well. Potentially a big opportunity for him to see a lot more red zone touches, only because he's a big guy to throw to, and so much attention is going to be on the outside. He could see a lot of it passes over the middle. That's one of the things about Green Bay is they don't really care who scores the touchdown; they just want to score touchdowns, and they can score
Yeah,
touchdowns a
exactly.
lot. And so,
Hmm.
uh, with how potent that offense is and how great Aaron Rodgers is, I expect a similar performance from Robert Tonyan. One thing with him is if you're in a PPR league, just based off just the stats from last year and throughout his career, you would like to see him get a little bit more catches. But I mean, if he only has 5 catches, but he has a touchdown with 50 receiving yards, that's not a bad performance from your tight end. Honestly, I think if I
Hmm.
based off the games he played last year, he averaged. Let's see here. Um, he averaged just under 12 points per game. And so that's from your tight end, not in that top tier of tight ends that we talked about. That's a pretty solid performance, in my opinion, and that'd be very nice to have, just having those steady results.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. And especially, too, I think Green Bay is going to have a much more high powered offense than somebody like the Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
And they're going to be much more dynamic with Aaron Rodgers back there. So Robert Tonyan is definitely a guy to look out for. I know his ADP, I think, was around like 9 or 10.
That's where I've been seeing him, and I've been seeing
Yeah.
TJ Hockenson probably around 7 or 8. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that's where you're going to be seeing these guys because, and we talked already a little bit about it, but the tight end position, it is very thin, probably definitely more thin than the running back position. And so
Yeah.
you're going to see the guys like Kelsey and Waller potentially even go in the first round or early second round, just because
Yeah.
there's value so high. And then in between then, trying to pick up these guys when they're available
Hmm.
to you in the right time, and hopefully the
Yeah.
seventh, eighth, ninth round to get
Yeah.
a quality tight end or one of the better tight
Hmm.
ends.
Yeah. And so, speaking of guys that I feel like are going to be quality tight ends, I'm going to stick to that NFC North division uh, and actually do tight end Irv Smith Jr. with the Vikings. So
Mm-hmm.
that's 3 tight ends in that NFC North, but he's the only guy that's really there. Last season, he had 30 receptions for about 370 yards and 5 touchdowns. And they got rid of Kyle Rudolph, who was also about 30 receptions for about 350 yards, and I think 6 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
So we just by addition by subtraction, Irv Smith Jr. could see his numbers go up by 50 or maybe even double to 100%, and he could be a 60 catch, 700 yard, 10 touchdown tight end next year.
Yeah.
Just because he's going to get more opportunities. It does look like Justin Jefferson has hurt his shoulder in training camp, so especially in the beginning of the season, he may be a guy that will get more targets just because Justin Jefferson is not there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I think that Irv Smith Jr. is a guy that if you want either tight end depth or you just have neglected the tight end position in your draft entirely and you're just looking for a guy to plug in for the first couple of weeks and wait and see if a tight end emerges in free agency, I think Irv Smith Jr. might be your guy to kind of take and then just see how it works out.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for him. Kirk Cousins and Kyle Rudolph had a good relationship, and I think that should
Yeah.
carry over into Irv Smith Jr. And so I think he's a guy that in a late round situation you could definitely pick up.
Well, and it's going to be something similar, I feel like, to Robert Tonyan. Like, actually, his production is almost half of Robert Tonyan, but just because Kyle Rudolph it is there. But the situation is very similar for Irv Smith because you got Justin Jefferson on one side, Adam Thielen on the other side. You got a solid running back in Dalvin Cook right behind you. So there's going to be a lot of red zone opportunities because that offense is going to be able to move the ball. And if they decide to double cover Jefferson and then they lock down Adam Thielen, then you've got Irv Smith over the middle. So there's just going to be a lot of opportunities, and I think he's going to see a lot of success just based off the pieces around him and how effective they are. It's going to be very similar to watch. Love to see him do well. It's always nice to see. I feel like Vikings fans needs to. And I feel like we need to give them one. I just feel like they've been through a lot. So it'd be great to see Irv Smith kind of be a breakout tight end candidate this year. But if you haven't already, like this video and make sure you subscribe to our channel so you can see when we post new content. Type down at the bottom your comments on any potential tight ends that we missed or just your overall thoughts on this video, whether you like it, think we're dumb, either or. We love seeing it. So, but anyways, we will be posting a new video on, I believe, next Thursday as well. So we'll be looking out for that one, and we will see you next time. Bye.